This episode of the Occasional Podcast is brought to you by the LSA Group, the new high-end, high-value speaker standard, and also Core Power, state-of-the-art power at real-world prices. Today's episode is also brought to you by Qobuz, lossless and high-res streaming and downloads. 50 million tracks in all genres in the best possible quality. Qobuz supports the audio industry and appreciates the needs of discerning audiophiles. Try it for free now at Qobuz.com. That's Qobuz.com. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. We are now officially rounding the bend on Season 4 of the Occasional Podcast. So, it's been a crazy year. I don't think anyone would deny that it's been unusual, to say the least. All the audio shows have been canceled, but now, this month, and the past month as well, we're kind of seeing the audio shows reshuffling a bit, rescheduling in a hopeful manner that they will be able to have a show in 2021. Earlier this week, we saw the dates for Expona in Chicago, Schaumburg, Illinois specifically, August 27 to 29 in 2021. So they have officially set their flag in the ground for 2021, and it's looking like it's August. Also, a new show. It's kind of a rare time to come out with a new show, but they got some dates. This one is for the Pacific Northwest. It's called the Pacific Audio Fest, Seattle, Washington, July 30 to August 1st, 2021. So still pretty far out there, almost a year away, but a brand new show joining the fray. And this one just came across my desk today, and I thought it was awesome. It is a new show in Europe, actually, a very fun favorite city of mine, Zurich, Switzerland. A new show called The Finest Audio Show. The Finest Audio Show. And it is put together by none other than the high-end audio show in Germany that usually takes place. So they are connected, those two. And that one, the date is very close, I think. January 9 and 10 of 2021. And that is going to be held just outside of the main part of Zurich. So it's encouraging. We're kind of trying to get all together again and recoup, reset, and fingers crossed that we're able to do it this year. I think it'd be great. Even with the unfortunate circumstances in 2020, it hasn't been all bad this year. There's been a lot of great stuff going on in audio. Great products are still coming out. The inbox is exploding this week with all the new products coming out for Christmas season. So there are some supply chain issues for a lot of people. Sometimes companies the inventory is backed, ordered. Of course, some problems do exist, but it really hasn't stopped the marketing machine and new stuff from coming out, which is fun, I think. So I've asked a dear friend of ours, Rafe Arnott from Resistor Magazine, to give us his top 5 favorite things in audio that have come out in 2020. So we're like 3/4 of the way through the year here. There's plenty to report on. He's got his recommendations. But first, I just want to let you know, Rafe's gorgeous site launched recently. You can find all of his news, reviews, commentary, lifestyle, and beautiful photography that he's known for at RESISTORMAG.com. That's RESISTORMAG.com. He's got tons of stuff. You can connect with him on social media there. So we thank Rafe for sending something over. Take it away, Rafe.
Hi, this is Rafe Arnott from Resistor Mag, here for Brian Hunter to talk about things in 2020 that have impressed me, because there's not been a lot to be too impressed about with the year so far. But in the world of hi-fi and music, there are a few things that really stand out. One of them, for me, would have to be Tricky's new LP that just hit stands. It's called Fall to Pieces. It's been a while since I've caught up with the UK trip-hop legend. His 1995 debut, Max and K, is still one of my all-time favorite LPs, and his latest is an emotional tour de force that paints a sparse landscape of loss after the death of his daughter, Maisie, last year, just as he was about to head into the studio to start this album. Vocal partner Marta Zlawakowska features prominently, and her ethereal lyrics laid over everything help flesh out the bones of this brilliant LP. Definitely one to check out. Up next would have to be the Shindo Mr. T Power Conditioner. What can I say? It's not new to 2020, but for me, it's back in the mix to supply my varied digital front end. And it's not what you notice when using it, it's what you notice as soon as it's gone. Blacks get blacker, spatial cues become more visible, and tone, pitch, timbre, and drive all noticeably improve. Also CDs. I can't get enough of buying CDs since I got my Audio Note CD 4.1X spinning. It's been trashing a few respected vinyl front ends and DAC server front ends I've got around the house right now, and really doing a great job of reminding me just how much information and sheer musicality Red Book discs possess. Plus, who can pass up $4 copies of Van Gelder Blue Notes at the local record store bins? The name Super Nate 3, well, I thought the name XS3 was a slice of pace, rhythm, and timing pie to die for, but the Nate 3 takes everything the XS3 does and turns the dial up to even better. Every department. It's a single box triumph for analog lovers with its new moving magnet phono stage. And I can tell you the 3 gets awfully intimate for a Class AB solid state integrated. It's definitely one worth checking out if you're looking for that type of solution. And finally, on a literary note, The Vinyl Detective, Low Action. This is Andrew Cartmell's 5th novel in the Pulp Fiction series of noir thrillers, which involves a nameless protagonist, a svelte dame partner, murder, creepy villains, rare LPs, British high-fidelity gear, and a pair of cats. One of the most entertaining writers I know of, regardless of genre. The fact that he can get me to laugh out loud, learn about lost jazz, big band, folk, and punk legends while being propelled forward by the constantly twisting plot lines makes every book in this series a favorite for me, and I can't recommend them highly enough. So that's it for me. Rafe Arnott, RESISTORMAG.com. Please stop by and spend some time with us. We'd love to see you.
Today's episode is sponsored by Sonus Faber. Fine, handcrafted loudspeakers designed and manufactured in Vicenza, Italy. With over 35 years of advanced technological research and development, our elegant designs will allow you to experience an emotional connection with your music like never before. Discover your local dealer at sonusfaber.com. I'd have to say one of my favorite things this year was reviewing the QLN Signature 3 bookshelf stand mount style speakers. Today's interview is with Mats Andersen of QLN. He is the designer and owner of the company, and he gives us an exceptional vantage point into the intricacies of two-way speaker design. I was mightily impressed with what he was able to squeeze out of a small real estate stand mount speaker. The Signature 3 blew me away with its robustness, its extension, and most importantly, the way it kind of felt like a full-size floor standing speaker, but in a very small size. So we explore all the ins and outs of that in this interview, really kind of take a deep look at how to make a great two-way, how they compare to a three-way, what the problems can be, what the benefits can be, and just basically if you're contemplating two-way or three-way design, just a lot to chew on. So please enjoy Mats Andersen from QLN. Hey everybody, thanks for joining us today. A very special guest, Mats Andersen from QLN. How are you doing today over there? We're in a bit of a different time change. I think actually this is the biggest time difference I've ever done this.
Okay, it's 7 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's very hot.
Oh, is it?
85 Fahrenheit.
And how you guys been faring so far with the situation with COVID-19?
Actually, for me, it's quite normal. I work most from home, and so do my family. And It's not a big difference actually, and we did it a little bit different in Sweden. We didn't close down everything.
Oh, really?
No, schools is high school they closed, but not for the primary school up to let's say 16 years old. Under there, the school was still open all the time. We've taken different attitude to it and trying not to close down everything totally. And it seems now it's looking that when they're starting up again, it's coming back slowly. So, of course, we have more cases here in Sweden. But we also count different in Sweden. We trust our governments. We are very truthful. If one person die and they have coronavirus, there comes into the statistics as died in coronavirus. That is not necessarily the truth. It looks like statistics. You can twist it everything you want, different on how you set up the figures around it. So it's quite okay. Yeah.
Oh, that's good to hear. It's good to hear. We were actually first introduced through an associate of ours, Mark Sosa of Well Pleased AV. And I came into interaction with the QLN brand at a few audio shows. And one of the reasons we're kind of speaking today is that what really struck me about the products that you design are they have a very big sound stage, a very big sound in general. And that's not particularly uncommon in a lot of rooms, but what is uncommon is the physical size of the speaker is not very large compared to the sound that I got from it. So I'm kind of interested in just talking a little bit about your choices in speaker design, because you do have a kind of a unique proposition on a lot of levels. But first, I kind of wanted to get a little bit of a history of QLN. And I guess I got to ask, too, does QLN stand for anything specifically?
Yes, it's two names, not mine. Nils Liljeroth, N and L, and Lars Quicklund, L and Q. So these two names become QLN. And the company started late 70s, 79, 78. I think the first product come out to the market was QLN 1, spelled with the number 1. It was a square box, actually type of size, same drive units as was in the BBC mini monitor LS3 5A, but it was time coherent. So the base was mounted in a baffle that sticks out a little bit, called the kangaroo or the pregnant speaker. And that it's actually started for the time alignment thing. And that was also another thing with this speaker. It was quite heavily damped inside with damping panels for making a silent cabinet. For me, I'm making speakers for all my life. I had a pre-made speaker for 1.5 months in my life. And that was an old time ago. So I always make my own speakers. And my history actually, and the special thing about QLN actually started quite early. I come in contact with a special viscoelastic glue. And this was in the beginning of the 80s. And I thought I was studying at high school and I should be an engineer and so on. And speaker was just a hobby. So I looked for a company in Sweden that did cabinets that put a lot of effort into making them silent. And there I found QLN, quite close to where I live. So I joined them, come up to them and show my product. Then I never left. Actually was one guy, Lars Quicklund, he actually moved to his girlfriend in US. So I more or less quite quickly took over his role as a technician in the same time and did the study. As an electrical engineer and also studying some acoustics and so on. So there it started. And the whole thing about it is actually, what is special for QLN is actually two things about it's the time coherence, time alignment, and damping the cabinet. And all these things comes into every part actually in the speaker. It was just actually a couple of years I asked myself, what is the main line if I look to the speaker I made? Yes, I did the capacitor with some oil inside, so it was damping. The coils were baked, the crossover was glued, everything was hardwired. The cabinet, the cables was shielded with acoustical mass around it. Drive units, membrane, all material is non-resonant material. So using more or less soft domes, soft cone bodies. So actually all parts in a speaker is trying to kill resonance, try to kill noise. And the first time we did a speaker with this special glue, it is a sandwich design. It's a viscoelastic glue, and a viscoelastic glue is a glue with the length of the molecules are very long. So when you're trying to move it, stretch it, all these long molecules touch each other. They got friction. And because they are so long, so the conversion to vibrations to heat is very good. And that is actually what viscoelastic glue is all about. And you place it where it makes the best work. It's in the middle, because you have this sandwich design. The two sheets don't move to each other, because if you have two sheets and you're bending them, the outside becomes shorter because it's have a longer way when you bend it. And then you have frictions back and forward if you're looking to small area. So it's actually like you're taking your hands, and when you're freezing, you're trying to get heat, you rub them. And this is actually what's happening. So you're converting these vibrations into heat. And the first speaker we did was a well-braced speaker, thick MDF with 22 millimeters, as well to 24 millimeters. And we did the sandwich design with 2 times 12 millimeters with this glue. And I remember what tune we played. We played Tracy Chapman's first record. And we played on an ordinary speaker. Yes, it sounds okay. And we changed to the new cabinet with the damping cabinet. And what happened? We did some mistake in the crossover where it sounds less. Is it shortcut somewhere? Or are we checking? No, it's same crossover, nothing. And we listen to it and listen, yeah, it's but we still hear all the details. Everything is there. And then we go back to the other original speaker again, and I think, what a lot of mess, what a lot of noise, what a lot of things that isn't needed, actually, and that was cabinet vibrations. So you actually have to redesign the crossover when you're using this material that we call Q-board. And that is actually the story about what's special about QLN. And we did this early in late 80s. It come out to the market. And have continued since that, with a short break for 10 years. Sold the company, and 10 years later bought it back, 2012, and starting from zero again. And that is the new QLN. That is what the product you see today.
One of the other things I kind of thought was interesting, what I heard was, this really, like I said, big defined sound. And in floor standard, it's only a two-way design. Usually with a lot of larger speakers, they go to a three-way design. That being obviously, treble, mids, and lows are separated by 3 different drivers instead of just 2. Is there any particular reason why you guys decided to go with a two-way design when you had more room to go?
Yes, it's less complicated crossover. Every part you put into more components, more phase problems, and especially when you make a crossover between woofers and mid-range, it's very hard to get them play together. A standard, I will say 90% of most three-way speakers use a second order crossover, and you reverse the phase for the mid-range. and then it works most perfectly. Frequency-wise and everything is played together, but I don't like to reverse the phase for any drive units, because then it's actually not totally time coherent. Because what is music? Music is a ground tone and overtones, and there are a lot of overtones, and this have to be presented in the right way in the right time, and that is what is most important for me, that I feel I hear the sound from an instrument sounding more as an instrument, less high resolution, a lot of details, and focused on small things. I try to focus on the whole thing, looking at the big picture, because I want the whole orchestra, I want the whole instrument, I want the whole group, I want them play together, not focused on some small part. Then it's much more easy to use a two-way. The backside of a two-way, if of course you cannot have a very big woofer, the mid-range becomes a bit larger, you lose some, let's call it resolution, but you gain the whole picture. And you can do this, but it's also put a lot of demands on the drive units.
Right.
You need long linear travel, you need good resolution in the mid-range, you also need to be reasonably smooth in the mid-range because you have a bigger membrane. But you can come around this with some certain things. For example, if you have a soft cone, where at the higher frequency, not the whole cone is moving, it's just the inner part. Then the mass become less. And when the mass become less, you can get higher speed. At the lower frequency, the whole cone is moving. And of course, there are some part when the cone is starting to changing for acting as a piston and acting as when they have started to break up. And many modern drive units today, they are trying to use hard cones, and you're trying to focus to put this break on up frequency as high as possible. But sooner or less you will have it, and when you have it, you have a resonance. Then you can kill it with some crossover components, notch filter, and you can kill it for down 20 dB, but it's still with sound in time. So when you have the whole orchestra or rock band or whatever, and they stop, and then not everyone has stopped, the cone resonance is still there, and it can be 20 dB down, 30 dB down. You will still hear it after everyone stopped. You hear this ringing tone, and when you hear it once, you hear it all the times. So it's I have to control the breakups. To have to do this, you have to have good knowledge how to treat material. This is one very important part when you're working with this softer cone material, because they all behave different. Polypropylene, paper cones, glass fiber, carbon fiber, Kevlar, all sounds different. So you have to learn your materials, and you have to learn how to treat them, how to damp them without adding too much mass on the cone, because then it becomes slow. So it's a very lot of material knowledge actually in the final end. And you can also put copper rings inside the magnetic gap. That means the inductance for the coil will be less for higher frequency. That means you can put more current into the voice coil, and when you have more current into the voice coil, you get more speed. So all these things are not easy and cheap to do. So a good two-way speaker, really good two-way speaker, is actually quite costly. Actually, and that I prefer that. I have made some designs three ways. Not so many QLN, but I've done some designs for other company also. It was a local company in Sweden. It was a high-end dealer close to where I live, and they sell all the famous high-end American brands. You have been many years in the business, and we did starting to do some more or less cost is no object speakers. Go try all materials, a lot of expensive drive units, expensive crossover components. So it was a good lesson all there, also to do something different and how the things behave and what the cost is and what you can gain and what you lose. Many say about this speaker is hard. It's very hard to show on a technical point of view everything. Everything can be measured, but it's very hard to take out what part is important in the measurements. You have to do a lot of study, a lot of experience, try many different things. I've made speaker from 3-inch woofers up to 8-inch woofer, and they sound different. There are so many parts in what make a speaker sounds like it do. And if you come back to this, you're talking about this sound stage. Time alignment is important, and also the size of the cabinet. The big sound stage, it's important for me. This make the speaker disappear because I want to be close to the music. But I don't want to have it in my knee or hear every small artifacts about the lips they play. I want to hear the instrument, the voice, as I hear it in a live recording. That is important, to come close, to have the feeling of actually there is some living person standing there playing. Of course, you can never have 100% of that. It's starting to disappear at the microphone. Mm-hmm. But to come as close as possible. And then, of course, you have to know how does a human ear behave? What is important? How do we pick up the important things? And what is the important things? For me, the time alignment, the ground tone and the overtone should come together at the same time. The frequency spectrum is extremely wide for this. When you hit a drum, what make it sounds that impression, it's slam. Mm-hmm. It's actually important to have even the tweeter, all the tweeter part of the dynamic should also be there. Isn't it there, it's become slower. So there I learned the lesson. It's even if it hits the bass drum and the speed of it, force of it, how you feel it, it's important that the tweeter is there. And of course, for me, in time, because that even increase the dynamic. The dynamic is not only about big magnets and low mass. Okay, that is the first physical law. There are other things that are also important. Let's say for a three-way speaker, you can have a lighter mid-range. But the two-way, okay, the mid-range is a little more heavy. But if you have time alignment, you still have this dynamic. If you're looking for this drive units that is in the Prestige 3 that you heard on the show, actually quite heavy cone, but it doesn't sound like that. That's because the time alignment and the cone is allowed to break up by control. So it's actually in the high frequencies for the mid-range, it's have a lower mass. And there are, of course, other small things also. But the main thing is there. So it's about the sound stage is much about time alignment and get rid of all the surface around the drive units that blur the sound stage.
You talked quite a bit about two-way and three-way. Which is easier to design? A really cheap two-way or three-way? And also, is it easier to design a two-way or a three-way if it's more expensive?
Yeah. If you're taking a low-budget speaker, I would say two-way. It's no doubt. It's much easier because you can have some more cost for the drive units. And every components in a crossover cost money. Of course, you can choose very cheap components, but it's better to less is more. Less components, less things with better quality, even when you have a budget to work on. When we come up to more expensive, You have more freedom how to make it, but the more I make speakers quite long time. I'm starting to making this 30 years ago. It's actually the crossover components. With the old QLN, we did some budget speaker, less than €1,000. It was not so exotic design at that time. The cabinet was very exotic and some drive units, but let's say we cheated on cables, connectors and crossover components because we was not at the higher level at that time. And now when I bought back QLN again, I didn't want to build a big factory. I want to make all this thing you have tested and tried, and it's become too expensive. And so when I started, it was my company, no investors, no banks. It was only me. I could take any decisions I want. Mm-hmm. And I have the economical freedom to start with QLN the way I want. It didn't feed me at that time. So I was free to start my own choices, have that freedom. I worked a long time for this with different company. It's quite a good feeling to actually do what you want. And then I started more and more testing crossover components.
Now, in that scenario, did you feel like you were more willing to take a bigger risk? Is that how this innovation or these designs came about? Is because you weren't afraid to take a risk?
Yes, because if I failed, I didn't have to sell my house. I have that freedom to do that. Try different components, more expensive components. And we ended up with copper foil capacitor with paper insulation doped in oil. And they put it in a vacuum chamber for 24 hours to get rid of all air, because air is moving. Oil is you cannot compress oil in that way. So they become silent. They were extremely expensive. Capacitor for a tweeter cost about the same cost as an expensive tweeter from Scanspeak. And that is not cheap. That was exotic, but we learned from that there are a very big difference in crossover components for capacitors, for coils, for resistors, and for cables. They're always small, tiny parts, but are they important? Yes, the tiny part, but it's one tiny part important? No, but if you're taking 5 or 10 tiny parts, then it become important. So even the small details, how you set up the speaker, distance between the speaker and everything, the toe in and everything, you can tweak it by moving around everything, or put the amplifiers on some damping pads. So we're talking about damping again. Those things, they are important, but maybe less. But if you're taking care of all these small things, you get rewarded. So, yeah, even the smallest things counts. That is the final word.
I like that. Mats Andersen from QLN, thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Occasional Podcast Season 4. The Occasional Podcast is a production of the Part-Time Audiophile Network, which includes PartTimeAudiophile.com, the Occasional Magazine, the PTA Newsletter, and AudioHead.com. You can stay in touch with us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. The Occasional Podcast is produced and hosted by Brian Hunter, executive produced by Scott Hall at PTA Productions. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the Occasional Podcast on iTunes, Google, Spotify, or wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.